Welcome to Elevate Flight Instruction Videos. Let's cover the path to go from zero flying experience to getting your private pilot's license. Getting your private pilot's license is not necessarily a small task, and it can be challenging but very rewarding at times. Sticking it through comes with the privilege of flying solo or with passengers. This means you can take your friends, family, boyfriend, girlfriend, or a potential boyfriend or girlfriend if that's how you decide to court your significant other. It could be the start of a fun hobby or a possible career in aviation. Either way, getting your private pilot's license can seem like a tall task, so let's break it down. What does the actual training look like? It typically goes discovery flight to your first solo, and then from your first solo to your first solo cross country, and then from your solo cross country to your check ride. And in between each of those sections, you will have required training that is going to be determined by the FARs, also known as the Federal Aviation Regulations. You will need to be deemed proficient in those areas by your CFI or certified flight instructor. Also along the way, you will be completing ground training as well. Let's start from your first flight until you solo. Somewhere during this training, you will need to get at least a third class medical, and I will put a link in the description of this video for an FAA website on how to get your medical. Once you get your medical, you will need to get your student pilot's license. Get with your CFI to set you up with that student pilot's license. Keep in mind, you will have to be at least 16 to solo. If you're not 16, it doesn't mean you cannot do flight training. It just means you cannot solo yet. The actual flight training will be with a CFI to meet the requirements of FAR 6187, which is titled Solo Requirements for Student Pilots. The first couple flights are going to focus on getting you comfortable with controlling the airplane. You will be working on straight and level flight, turns, climbs, descents, turning climbs, turning descents. Once you get comfortable and good at that training, you will move into maneuvers like slow flight, steep turns, and ground reference maneuvers. These are more complex, but they will increase your stick and rudder skills. You will also be trained in emergency situations like engine failures and system or equipment malfunctions. Finally, you'll be ready to start working on your landings once all that other stuff is complete. Landing is definitely one of the most difficult things in your private pilot training, so expect to spend a decent amount of hours in the traffic pattern. The traffic pattern is just a circuit course where you take off and loop back around for a landing. It's the most efficient way to get a lot of practice in. Okay, that is the flight training for your first solo, but you will also need to do some ground training before you solo. In FAR 6187, it says you will need to complete an aeronautical knowledge test. This test must cover applicable sections in Part 61 and 91, airspace rules, flight characteristics, and flight limitations of the airplane that you will be doing your solo in. Your CFI will administer this test and grade it up to 100%. That means you will just review all your incorrect answers. To prepare for this test, your CFI or flight school will most likely have you enrolled in a ground course like Sporties or King Schools, and also pair with that, you will be doing one-on-one ground sessions with your CFI to get your knowledge ready. Also, in 6187, it says a student pilot must receive and log flight training and the maneuvers and procedures of this section. What maneuvers and procedures are they talking about? Well, they're talking about the maneuvers and procedures listed in 6187D. Conveniently enough, these are what your CFI has already been training you on. So when your instructor deems you are ready to fly by yourself, they will endorse you to go solo. For any pilot, the first solo is an awesome milestone. For the first time, you are PIC or pilot in command of the airplane. Normally, your solo will consist of 3 laps in the pattern, and after you are done, it is tradition to cut the back of your shirt. Now, people always wonder, why do you cut the back of your shirt on your first solo? And I don't know if it's a myth or not, but I heard the reason they cut the back of your shirt is because in a time where pilots didn't have headsets and they were training in planes with tandem seating, meaning the student will sit in front of the instructor would tug on the back of the student's shirt when they were doing something wrong. The cutting of the shirt is just a way to symbolize that your instructor no longer needed to tug on your shirt so that they were ready to go solo. Anyway, congrats. You had done your first solo. Now it's time to move on in your training and prepare for your first solo cross country. The training from your first solo to your first solo cross country gets a lot more exciting. This training will include short and soft field takeoff and landings, flying by referencing your instruments, navigating from point A to point B, night flying, and of course, flying cross countries. In this phase of your training, you will also be doing more solos around the airport. These help with building confidence in the airplane and getting those reps in to increase your skill. Just like your first solo, the FAA has regulations on maneuvers and procedures your instructor needs to deem you proficient in before they can send you on that solo cross country. And those are listed in 61.93E. And again, once your CFI is comfortable, they will send you on your first solo cross country. So now you have done your solo cross country. The next thing to prepare for is your check ride. There are a few boxes that you need to check off before you can take your check ride. You will have to do a written exam. During the entirety of your flight training, you should be working on an online ground school or be doing ground schooling with your flight school to be prepared for this exam. Once you are done with your ground schooling, your CFI will endorse you to take the written exam. Now, on the flying portion of things, you will need to make sure that you meet the FAA experience requirements, and those are listed in 61.109 to take the check ride. Most of these requirements you will have done just by preparing for your solos, but some of them you might still need to complete. To get your private pilot's license, you will need at least 40 hours of flight time, and that includes 20 hours of flight training with your CFI and 10 hours of solo flight. Your training must include 3 hours of cross-country training, 3 hours of night training, and with that, 1 cross-country over 100 nautical miles, and 10 takeoff and landings to a full stop, 3 hours of training by solely referencing the instruments, 3 hours of flight training with the CFI in the preceding 2 calendar months before the practical test, and 10 hours of solo time. This solo time must include 5 hours of solo cross-country time, a cross-country of more than 150 nautical miles with full stop landings at 3 points. 1 segment of the flight needs to be more than 50 nautical miles, and 3 takeoff and landings at an airport with an operating control tower. Keep in mind, these are the minimum requirements. Most people take extra time to be completely ready for your private pilot's license. Most people complete it in between 60 to 80 hours. So you'll probably do some extra flying to make sure you are in good condition for the check ride. You will really want to perfect those maneuvers before going to the practical exam. And lastly, time for your practical exam, which is also known as your check ride. There's a ground portion and a flying portion to it. You will be examined on the areas of operation listed in 61.107B. The DPE, or designated pilot examiner, will be using the private pilot ACS, also known as the Airman Certification Standard, as a rubric for your check ride. Your instructor will sign you off for the check ride when you are ready, so hopefully you're prepared to answer any question relating to the private pilot's license. And once you pass that, you are done.